File 187, The Winchester Enigma, location, San Jose, California, U.S. Date, 1886 to 1922 subject. Sarah Lockwood Party Winchester. If you've been here before, you already know what that means. This file opens with a widow, a hammer, and a whisper that never stopped echoing inside a house that refused to end. In 1881, after the death of her husband, William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester repeating arms fortune, Sarah inherited a vast estate built on the profits of death, rifles that had reshaped the American frontier. What followed was not mourning, but motion. A constant feverish construction that would last 38 years. Carpenters worked in shifts, day and night. Stairs led into ceilings, doors opened into walls, and corridors looped into nowhere. Sarah Winchester claimed she was following instructions, not from architects, but from the dead. Each nail, each hallway, each sealed window built to confuse the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle. According to accounts preserved by the San Jose Mercury News, she never stopped building, fearing that if the hammering ceased, they would find her. Tonight, we reopen the case. A house of endless rooms, a woman trapped between guilt and geometry, and a curse that might not be superstition, but design.
By 1881, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company had produced more than 500,000 rifles. They were called the gun that won the West, but behind every triumphal slogan lay an unspoken arithmetic, thousands of bodies that never made it into history books. When William Winchester died of tuberculosis, his widow Sarah inherited not only $20 million, but a royalty income of $1,000 per day, a fortune that, adjusted for inflation, would be over $25,000 daily today. Yet wealth brought no peace. Soon after her daughter Annie's death in infancy, Sarah fell into silence, consumed by guilt and the isolation of privilege. According to later biographical fragments and family correspondences, she began to consult spiritualists in Boston. One seance in particular, allegedly conducted by a medium named Adam Coons, would redirect the rest of her life. The message, as recorded in second-hand accounts, was simple and devastating. The spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle will never rest. They demand a house, a labyrinth, and you must never stop building. In 1886, Sarah moved west to California, purchasing an unfinished 8-room farmhouse on 162 acres near San Jose. From that day on, the construction never ceased. Work crews operated in rotating shifts. Orders came directly from Sarah's bedroom, where she would sketch new blueprints after midnight, guided by what she described as voices of the departed. To some, she was mad. To others, she was a woman engineering her own form of atonement, a cathedral not for worship, but for the restless dead. Construction began in 1886 and never stopped not for 38 years. The Winchester mansion grew like a living organism, unpredictable, recursive, feeding on its own confusion. Eyewitnesses described the house as a maze built by sorrow. Staircases rose into ceilings. Doors opened into empty air, dropping 3 stories to the garden below. Some rooms were fully furnished yet sealed off, their keys discarded. Architectural historians later identified more than 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, 40 stairways, and a single seance chamber that no carpenter could enter without Sarah's permission. No blueprints survived in full. Most were drawn on napkins, paper scraps, or directly on the walls. She never reused an exact design. Each edition was unique, an asymmetrical piece of a greater puzzle that seemed to expand without logic. Workers spoke of orders that changed overnight, windows bricked over, walls rebuilt in different directions, stairways cut in half. According to a surviving diary from carpenter John Hanson, 1897, She said the spirits were displeased with the plan. The hall must be longer or the stairway higher. None of us questioned her. We just kept building. The structure itself became a form of ritual. Every hammer strike, every plank nailed into place was an offering. The house absorbed noise and gave back silence. By the 1890s, San Jose residents had begun to whisper. Some called it the Spirit House. Others said it was cursed, that Sarah's wealth came not from rifles, but from the restless souls of the fallen. The line between architecture and exorcism had vanished. By the turn of the century, the Winchester mansion had grown into an architectural delirium visible from miles away. Its towers jutted from the fog like broken teeth, and the rhythmic hammering of carpenters echoed through the Santa Clara Valley day and night. Those who worked there spoke of a silence that never lasted long. When the house seemed still, faint knocks would begin, inside the walls, beneath the floorboards, behind locked doors that no one could open. Several servants later claimed that Sarah moved through the corridors at night, carrying a small oil lamp and a sheet of paper. She would stop suddenly, press her ear against the wall, and whisper, "Tell me where you are." Sometimes she turned and gave new construction orders before dawn. A letter preserved in the archives of the Winchester House Foundation, dated 1903, mentions a bell that must be rung at midnight and again at 2 a.m. Its purpose, the letter states, was to summon and release the spirits. Visitors in later decades would confirm the presence of that same brass bell hidden in the garden tower. The servants avoided the north wing entirely. According to diary entries from housekeeper Daisy Burbank, doors there opened by themselves, even when locked, and the temperature dropped as if someone invisible had entered. Sarah herself rarely spoke of these incidents. In a 1906 interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, she simply said, "The house is alive with purpose. I am only listening." For her, it was not haunting, it was communication. And the structure was the language. At 5:12 a.m., on April 18, 1906, the earth beneath San Francisco tore open. The shock traveled south through the Santa Clara Valley, fracturing glass, toppling chimneys, and splitting the walls of the Winchester mansion. Sarah was asleep in her bedroom when the quake struck. According to later testimony from her staff, the sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, a roar, metallic and endless, as if the foundations of the house were crying out. When the tremors stopped, part of the mansion had collapsed. The front wing, including the observation tower, crumbled into ruin. Dozens of rooms were buried under debris. Sarah was trapped for several hours behind a sealed door until workers pried it open. Afterward, she ordered the damaged sections boarded up permanently. She claimed that the spirits had given her a warning, that her constant expansion had angered them. The hammering ceased for the first time in 20 years. For several months, the valley fell silent. Yet silence never lasts in the Winchester house. By autumn, construction resumed, slower, quieter, but constant. This time, she focused inward, secret passageways, false chimneys, mirrored corridors that seemed designed to disorient whatever might still be following her. Visitors noticed her growing frailty. Her handwriting trembled. She began wearing a black veil at all times and rarely spoke to anyone outside her staff. In 1910, she wrote to a relative in Connecticut, "The house suffered, as I did. But it must never end. It must keep breathing." The earthquake became legend, not as a disaster, but as the day the house itself awoke. At the heart of the Winchester mansion lies a single locked chamber known only as the Seance Room. It is small, windowless, octagonal, and, according to every surviving record, the only room that Sarah entered alone. The door was fitted with 13 hooks. Inside stood a round table, a wooden chair, and a gas lamp fixed to the ceiling. The walls were lined with numbered pegs, as if marking invisible points on a compass. No one was permitted to enter except Sarah, and even the servants avoided passing near it after dusk. According to oral histories recorded by early caretakers, she entered the seance room precisely at midnight. A few minutes later, the sound of a bell echoed through the mansion, summoning what she called her Council of Spirits. She would remain inside until 2 a.m. When the bell rang again, the signal of dismissal, those hours shaped the destiny of the house. Witnesses recalled that at dawn, she would emerge pale and silent, carrying pages of sketches covered in chaotic geometry. By afternoon, construction orders followed, new walls, sealed doors, stairs redrawn. No reliable record describes what occurred inside. But one surviving object, a brass planchette inscribed with the number 13, was found after her death, stored in a velvet pouch. Paranormal researchers in later decades suggested that the room functioned as a spiritual observatory, a map between the living and the dead. For Sarah, it may have been both a laboratory and a confessional, a place where architecture met repentance and geometry became prayer. Everywhere inside the Winchester mansion, the number 13 repeats like a secret code. 13 steps on a staircase, 13 windows in a room, 13 hooks on a door. Even the drain covers in the garden fountains bear 13 holes. To the untrained eye, it appears superstition, a gesture toward the occult. But deeper study of the surviving floor plan suggests deliberate mathematical structure. According to architectural analysts from the 1970s Restoration Project, rooms align along invisible axes that converge around multiples of 13, forming a geometric rhythm that permeates the entire estate. Some historians interpret this as Sarah's obsession with control, a numerical ritual meant to impose order upon chaos. Others see it as communication, a code for the dead, perhaps derived from the spiritualist numerology she studied in Boston circles before leaving the East Coast. Letters recovered from her desk after her death confirm she owned several volumes on sacred geometry and Pythagorean correspondences. One margin note, written in her distinctive script, reads, "Structure is redemption. The recurrence of 13 extends even to her will, signed on the 13th page, divided into 13 sections and witnessed by 13 people." It is as if she believed that repetition could ward off randomness, that the right pattern might contain the chaos she carried within. Today, visitors describe the feeling of walking through that rhythm, the way the steps, windows, and walls seemed to pulse with a hidden cadence. 13 was not a number. It was her heartbeat translated into architecture. By 1915, Sarah Winchester had withdrawn almost entirely from public life. Her estate now covered nearly 6 acres, and the mansion had become both sanctuary and labyrinth, a body she inhabited and a prison she had built herself. Neighbors rarely saw her. The few who did described a frail woman dressed in mourning black, her face obscured by a veil, moving through the gardens at dusk like a shadow among the orange trees. The outside world was changing. The First World War raged overseas. The Winchester Company produced rifles for the U.S. Army, and once again her family name became synonymous with death. Sarah's letters from that period revealed deep conflict. In one she wrote, "They have learned nothing. The house grows, but the world repeats its wounds." Visitors, rare and carefully screened, noted her obsession with routine. Every night she rang the same bell at midnight, entered the seance room, and emerged hours later pale and trembling. Her handwriting became smaller, her drawings more abstract, spirals, mirrored rooms, walls intersecting at impossible angles. In her later years, she rarely ventured beyond the property. Even her meals followed ritual precision, always at the same hour, always in a different room. Servants rotated plates and cutlery according to handwritten instructions, signed only with an initial S. On September 4th, 1922, Sarah died in her sleep of heart failure at the age of 83. The hammering stopped that morning for the first time in nearly 4 decades. The carpenters laid down their tools, and the house, that immense machine of grief, fell silent. When Sarah Winchester died, the house froze in time, mid-hammer, mid-staircase, mid-whisper. The workers were dismissed, and for the first time in nearly 4 decades, silence replaced motion. What remained was a body of wood and glass, veins of corridors, lungs of hollow rooms. In the months that followed, relatives and lawyers cataloged the estate. The inventory took weeks: 161 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, and over 40 staircases, many leading nowhere. No master plan was ever found. Some walls contained doors that opened onto brick. Others concealed secret shafts connecting entire wings. Architectural engineers who examined the site in 1923 described it as a living organism interrupted in growth. Even in stillness, it felt unfinished, as if waiting for orders that would never come. The furniture was auctioned, the personal effects divided, but the mansion itself resisted classification. Local newspapers referred to it as a puzzle in timber, while the San Francisco Examiner called it an architectural seance, a house built by ghosts for ghosts. When restoration teams entered decades later, they discovered odd acoustics, footsteps echoing from no visible source, drafts of cold air without origin, faint pressure changes between sealed rooms. Engineers documented these anomalies without speculation, yet their reports read more like autopsy notes than architectural surveys. Even today, visitors claim to feel disoriented, as if the house rearranges itself when unobserved. Some swear they hear the faint rhythm of construction in the walls, a distant hammer, a nail tapping in the dark. The mansion did not die with its owner. It merely learned to breathe without her. A century has passed since Sarah Winchester's death, yet the mansion in San Jose remains strangely awake. Each night, its windows catch the pale light of the valley. Each corridor breathes a faint draft, as if exhaling from the lungs of something that still remembers. Today it stands as both museum and monument, a paradox preserved in wood. Tour guides speak softly, their voices swallowed by the vast geometry of silence. Visitors walk through rooms that lead nowhere, climb staircases that vanish into ceilings, and emerge uncertain whether they've been followed or gently redirected by design. Engineers explain the anomalies as ventilation quirks, pressure shifts, temperature gradients, but none can quite define the sensation that lingers, the feeling that the house listens, that each footstep is recorded, echoed, and filed away somewhere in its structure. In the archives, a faded document lists the final inventory of rooms and measurements. At the bottom, written in pencil by an unknown hand, is one sentence: "The building is unfinished because the message was never complete." Perhaps that is the truth of the Winchester enigma, not a haunting, but a confession carved into architecture. A human attempt to speak with loss using the only language grief understands: repetition. If you ever stand in the mansion after dusk, you might hear it too. Not ghosts, but memory hammering faintly, searching for symmetry in an endless design.